Can we just wait a minute? Yeah, you're good.
Currently, we have an education system that has so much flexibility that students are leaving with different conceptions of what it means to be a New Zealander, different basic knowledge with which they enter this world. What we want to do inside Affirmative is create unity, coherence in that knowledge, and create modern New Zealanders that are capable of facing the challenges of a modern world. What do we support specifically in today's debate? 4 things. Firstly, an exact content that is taught being set by the national curriculum at all public school levels. We take all of the examples in the info slide, but specifically it looks like history having a topic in like year 13 or year 11 for a term about racism in New Zealand. It looks like English having text set from a Muslim perspective or a homosexual perspective, or talking about those issues. It looks like in economics, talking about the harms of things like Rogernomics and Ruth Richardson's mother of all budgets on poverty. Secondly, we think setting of this curriculum will look like civil servants consulting with schools, educational experts, university professors, and the public. Thirdly, we're happy to review and refine the curriculum over a period of time. And fourthly, all aspects within a certain topic, like racism in New Zealand, will also be outlined as to what specifically is being taught. So racism to certain groups and in what ways that is felt. And the exams will test this unified content. We're going to prove our case through 4 substantives. Firstly, why important content is currently not being taught in NZ schools. Secondly, how teaching a set curriculum creates a more cohesive society that is prepared to face the challenges of a modern world. Thirdly, why this specifically uplifts the quality of education in low decile and disadvantaged schools. And ESO will split, telling you how we create an education system that's more inclusive of Indigenous culture. Firstly then, let's take a look at why important content is not being taught under the status quo, because this provides the key problem with which you should view this debate. Look, we think there are 2 cases. Firstly, let's take a look at some content that's not taught at all with a flexible curriculum that allows staff and schools to pick and choose what content within like a broad setting of something like who we are as New Zealanders, they're able to choose whatever they want. Why are they going to leave out certain things? Firstly, because some teachers are just not as interested in certain content and certain subjects on a very basic level. So what they choose is influenced by their own interests. They might not be that interested in Indigenous culture, so they might leave some of those texts out. Secondly, some schools are overly traditional. So they like teaching things like traditional text or traditional history. So it might mean that they focus on European histories to the detriment of New Zealand histories. There's also some of these traditional schools might have undertones of racism within like traditional staff or student bodies. We think we can break that down when we set these set curriculums. Thirdly, we tell you in some schools there's lots of pressure from parents, and so this informs what the school teaches, because when the parent says I've got a preference for my kid to be taught this certain view of economics or this certain view of English text or only teach Shakespeare, that influences what the school teaches. Fourthly, we tell you some content is just harder to teach because either it's like easier just for students to grasp or for teachers to be able to convey a message, or it might be like less controversial, less charged, so that makes it the school far more willing to teach this type of text, and the school avoids like particularly controversial or charged text. But secondly, we tell you that even if schools don't like completely neglect some of this content, we think in some cases some really important bits of content aren't just taught in full. So it might look like instead of like only focusing on the dorm rates for a period, because you either prioritise other things within your curriculum, or just because the content is so broad it doesn't specify that you need to have like an in-depth analysis into a certain topic, into a certain part of the curriculum. This means that there are severe deficiencies within what New Zealanders are being taught that needs to be rectified. Our policy does this. Before I move on, I'll take a view on that.
Does every student have the same interest, same level of achievement, and the same passions?
No, we don't think that they do, but we think students can be interested in different texts even if they come from different perspectives. We think there are still going to be multiple texts within a school year that they can engage with, but also students aren't choosing it under your side of the house either. The people who are choosing it are parents, are teachers, are staff, are schools. I don't see the point of that POI. Secondly, let's take a look at how we create a more cohesive society that's prepared to face challenges of a modern world. Because on our side of the house, when the national curriculum is able to set all of the content, we're able to choose the curriculum. So this means that we can include important content about New Zealand history, about the land wars that was missed out under the side of the house and that we think as a society is important. It also means that we can exclude particularly bad content, and that's just a win that we get on our side of the house too. So we're not teaching things like the Merchant of Venice, which has undertones of anti-Semitism, under our side of the house. That's just an easy win for us. So how does this set content craft benefit New Zealanders? Four things. Firstly, it can promote cultural and gender understanding, because when you learn about different cultures and perspectives in specific texts that are set from a perspective of someone who is gay or lesbian, we think that that's really valuable because racism and homophobia comes from ignorance. And if you're not exposed to these texts or this history at school, you're not going to learn it. Secondly, we can promote good values and characters of modern New Zealanders. So by setting English texts that have certain protagonists that show like perseverance through adversity or something, we think we're able to instill those things in children. Thirdly, we tell you all citizens have a basic understanding of the modern world, which is really important when they come to things like voting. So when we tell them in economics about the harms of things like economics and market liberalisation, it means that they make more informed decisions at the ballot box. They're not going to be drawn in by populist rhetoric to the same extent. Fourthly, we just tell you we create citizens with more critical thinking skills because teachers aren't always taking the easy option. They might be teaching and engaging with some of these harder texts. That's really, really beneficial because students have to be able to engage with some of these harder texts at a tertiary level and when they're thinking in society with decisions like voting. We get all of the benefits of creating a far more robust curriculum that fits the needs of a modern New Zealand. Finally, then, let's take a look at how we specifically uplift the quality of education in lower decile schools. We think we do this in two ways. Firstly, because there's a pool of resources effect that we create when you get a national curriculum, where every single school is teaching a text like Waiora, a Māori play by Hone Kuka, in English. That means that not only the Ministry of Education or NZQA is going to be providing like resources on these texts, but there's also pooling of resources between schools because not only are like high decile schools teaching it, but you've also got low decile schools teaching it. When there's that pooling of resources of schools, lower decile schools which maybe don't have the same quality of teaching staff will have their disadvantage get all of those benefits. Secondly, we just tell you we create greater mobility of teachers under our side of the house because there's no longer a difference or a differentiation between what's being taught in schools. Teachers are far more transferable. We're likely to see a greater flow of teachers between schools. That means we stop problems like lower decile schools having worse quality teachers, but there's also not different curriculums that make some schools so proud to create a robust curriculum that makes modern New Zealanders proud to propose.
I thank the speaker for his speech, and I invite the first speaker of the negating team to begin his team's case.
it is abhorrent that the affirmative side of the house would have people in low decile schools, people who have never had a proper education, learn texts such as War and Peace by Leo Tolstoy, that they're never going to be able to understand, never going to be able to engage with, and are never going to pass an exam on. Outside of the house prefers content that is relevant and engaging for these students. Three things that I'm going to talk about today. Firstly, I'm going to tell you about what we stand for. Secondly, how we help to improve education, how the affirmative side of the house destroys engagement in the education system. Thirdly, how AF can no longer cater to different levels of achievement. And in this debate, what we're going to prove to you is that the affirmative side of the house will lower the educational results of our students and have these lower education students left behind. But before I go on to that, a couple of pieces of rebuttal. The first thing I'm going to talk about is this idea of important content not being taught. Two things about this. Firstly, we believe that importance is subjective. We think that the Maori languages are going to be more important to different groups than others, and we think that we can't just clarify and make a generalization about what matters to different people. But we also think that teachers are generally picking some concept that is relevant to their students anyway, and is most important. A couple of reasons for this. Firstly, we think that our teachers care for students. They know about them, they've seen their struggles, they know what they've gone through. So they want them to succeed, and they want to teach them stuff that is relevant and important in their life. But secondly, we think that they're going to pick things that are going to help them pass, because if they don't have their students passing, then they're simply going to lose their job, right? And so there is this incentive for them to help pick content that is relevant and is going to be important too. Okay, second thing that I'm going to piece of rebuttal about, we heard this claim about non-unity. Why is this not actually going to happen? Firstly, we tell you that if racist teachers are going to be in our school system, they're going to be teaching, they're going to have opinions and biases that are passed through regardless of the content. We think that if we had Maori landlords, for example, they're probably still just going to blame it on different groups. It doesn't matter what the content is and whether it is necessarily racist inherently, they're still going to be able to pass judgment on it. But we also think that the majority of teachers aren't actually racist in reality or homophobic. We think that most of them don't want to lose their job, and if they are teaching these things, then that is a problem that we're willing to fix, but they will lose their job most of the time. No. And then third piece of rebuttal is lower decile schools are going to be pushed up. We think that reality is that these lower decile students are going to be left behind, and I'll talk about why that will happen later. Okay, on to my first point. What do we stand for? What we're defending today is the status quo. This is the status quo. What we support is this looks like a history teacher being able to choose the topic and the content for the courses and consequences paper. We think that in an all-girls school, there is relevance and importance from them picking this women's suffragette movement over something completely unrelated from a generalised curriculum produced by somebody in London. No. We are willing, though, to help go over fundamental flaws. If there are in the system, we are willing to review the education system as we go forward as well. Okay, on to the second point. How does AF destroy engagement in the education system? Just before we go further, it's important to understand the difference between the two cases. What the affirmative side of the house is proposing is that we have somebody from the government choosing the case, choosing the content. We think that they can never be able to understand the importance and the needs of their students as much as somebody who has been teaching their students, comes from a similar background, understands what these children are going through, and we think that they're going to just be able to, on the affirmative side of the house, pick the most generalised content for what they believe to be the average student. How does our side of the house get better engagement instead? Three reasons for this. Firstly, is regional relevance. What we think is that if there is a problem in a certain area, such as measles in South Auckland, that it's important to teach about, and that there's going to be students who are interested in it. We think that, if you are seeing that your family members are dying and because of the measles, then you're clearly going to care. That is more important to you, and that you should be taught about this. But we think that's not necessarily relevant to somebody who isn't going through the same situation in Dunedin. Second thing is minority curriculums. So if we think about schools that have got a high population of, say, Pacific or Maori students, then what's important to them, such as specific history, specific culture, isn't going to be the same. It's an all-boys school that's predominantly white, has this very different culture, very different heritage. They want to maybe learn about Napoleonic wars, but that's completely irrelevant to these students. We think that they're more interested about learning about where their ancestors came from. And we think that we can help to achieve this. Thirdly is gender difference. So we're thinking about all-girls schools here, right? We think that in all-girls school, if we look towards history, learning about the suffragette movement is particularly relevant to them, but isn't the same relevance to people in these all-boys schools. But we think realistically, in the affirmative side of the house, these curriculums may be left out because they may not be seen as important to all of the population. Whereas on our side of the house, if the teacher is making decisions about what is most relevant to most of their students, in this specific example, then they are able to better cater to their needs. F cannot get these better engagements because they have a generalization of the needs of the people in our society. Why is more engagement beneficial to society? Well, we think that simply, we will get students more likely to put effort into it. Two reasons for this. Firstly is that they probably find it more interesting. Why is this? Well, they can see a point to it, right? If you were able to point to a pre-existing experience you had or seeing it in your community, then you're probably going to understand the importance and the relevance of it. So you're more likely to put in extra effort and learn about it. But secondly, they're more likely to care more. We go back to that example of the South Auckland measles outbreak. Seeing your family members dying and knowing that you now can learn about context about how to save them is going to have a massive impact on your willingness to go forward, study hard, and get grades to be able to do something in the future and save your future family member. This is important because at the end of the day, our side of the house is going to be having students who are putting in more effort and are going to be producing better grades going into the future.
I mean, anti-Muslim and homophobic rhetoric is based on ignorance and not understanding these perspectives. Why do you want to deprive New Zealanders of an understanding of those perspectives?
I already addressed this a bit in the rebuttal already, but what we've already talked about is that if there is a racist teacher, they are going to pass on influence anyway, regardless of the content, but also most teachers don't actually have that incentive to go ahead and spread their racist views because they will lose their job, as I've already mentioned. Third point, final point. How can ACT no longer cater to different levels of achievement? So if we think about what they're proposing, what they have is a centralized model that is catered to the middle, the average person. What we think this means is forcing people to learn about the Great Gatsby in English, just this middle line text, or forcing people to learn about this baseline topic in history, such as the Rwandan genocide. Why is this bad? Two different groups. We have lower achieving students and then we have the top students. Firstly, lower achieving students. We think that if you have these low decile scores, they may have large numbers of people like dyslexic students and such, then they're not going to ever be able to understand the complex and difficult themes of these books. It's better for them to learn things such as the Hunger Games, because then they can actually pass their classes, they can actually go forward in life, and they're not going to be stuck in high school. We would rather that an English C class at third level is being taught appropriate content, that they actually have a chance of understanding and enjoying and engaging in this proposal from the app, that they're learning these extremely complicated texts. But what about the other side of the coin? Top students. Well, we're now forcing them to go down, and we have this average text. And these students are also forced to learn it. They're not able to learn the most difficult content and push themselves and strive to go forward. We're capping their potential. And that is extremely detrimental to them because they cannot become that highly successful student that we wish to be. At the end of this speech, what we've proven is that we're going to have students more interested in education, and it is going to be more relevant to them, and it is going to help them further going through their life because it will be set at a more appropriate skill level for understanding.
I thank the speaker for his speech, and I invite the second speaker of the affirmative team to continue her team's case.
Negating fails to understand the key problem in this debate. It's that the status quo is failing, it's that the education system doesn't cater to the needs of modern citizens, and New Zealanders are being left behind by the educational system. In this speech, I'm going to address the two ideas that they brought about engagement and how people are going to be able to engage with the new education system, and secondly, about why it no longer caters to different levels of education, and address why we've given structural analysis as to why this will give a better understanding of important issues, and why Isaac has given a few reasons as to why important New Zealand issues are not being catered to in the educational system, and then I'm going to go on to give my substantial contribution about why this change is going to better include Indigenous perspectives and cultures into the national curriculum itself. Firstly, this negating first speaker has come out and said that because we're going to be teaching War and Peace to lower decile students, and that they're not to like what the issues are in their society. Firstly, we tell you that this isn't actually even happening in the status quo. They're not being told about the measles outbreak in school. They're being given a general education where the school and the parents already teach what is most easy for them to teach. They teach the things such as To Kill a Mockingbird and text in English and in history, which have huge amounts of resources online. Because firstly, for these lower decile communities, it's incredibly hard for these teachers to pool the resources to actually teach in important issues in New Zealand education. And secondly, Isaac gave you reasons as to why these schools wouldn't actually teach this content, because for some reasons they may be controversial, there might be a lot of backlash if this content is taught, and there might be a lot of pressure from parents to not talk about these issues in school. But when you have a nationalized educational system, what you actually get is that firstly the government prioritizes these issues. They identify that these are issues worth talking about, and they're going to be able to pool these resources such that these lower decile schools are going to be able to talk about them. We also have better visibility for texts such as from a homosexual perspective, or texts that address issues such as racism in the community, because the government is going to actually identify that these are important for people to learn about, and they're actually going to go on to provide resources that these people can use to teach them. They basically told us that it's incredibly lower engagement for boys' schools to learn about these issues because they're not their perspectives, and they're not perspectives they engage with every single day. But we've already brought to you all the way from first that it's incredibly beneficial for these people to learn about content that isn't from their specific perspectives. Furthermore, it's also important for these people to actually learn about things that generally improve their lives in the modern society, such as genetics, such as evolution, and such as modern economics, which hasn't been taught by schools because some lower decile schools don't have the resources to teach them. We much prefer a world where they can actually have these resources at their disposal, such that higher decile schools are also teaching the same content as lower decile schools. These resources are being told that this drag the overall quality of education up, so that most schools are learning about this content that makes them better citizens and they're prepared for the modern world. Secondly, they also just discuss the idea of how it's not going to be able to cater to lower quality education, why it's going to be harder for students to engage with this harder content. We're firstly going to tell you that this actually is incredibly engaging with the case that we brought you. We've given you a textbook which actually sets forth what we want to teach in schools. However, we never said that all students would be dragged out to be taught the exact same content. These textbooks are going to be able to encourage these students to learn to a certain degree, but it's also going to be able to cater to these lower decile schools that haven't had this level of education before. This is the idea of a nationalized textbook that's going to have this content regardless, and these teachers are going to be raised up so that they can teach them to bring back the ideas that I've already brought to you about pooling the resources, and also a higher level of teachers in general, because they're going to be able to engage with this content in general.
Is content relevant to 5% of the school population appropriate and engaging for the other 95%?
We think that even if you have 5% of audience individuals in schools, it's important as New Zealanders and as the national curriculum should curate to content that actually teaches people about the understanding. Because in the current status quo, there's an incredible amount of bigotry, and there's an incredible amount of ignorance around these issues because they are the minority. If you follow the Negative logic, because these people are the minority, they're never going to be engaged with in the educational system, they're never going to be talked about, and therefore we're not going to see the structural change that we bring to you on an affirmative. When you learn about this content in school, when you actually can engage with these people and go on to have huge impacts in society. Moving on to the idea that went completely unresponded to in our case, we also told you that we are going to create a much more cohesive society for 4 reasons, such as better understanding of these cultural issues. However, also there's more critical skills that improve people at the voting ballot when they're actually engaging with economics. It's completely recognized by the debating team when they discuss certain things they're going to only be addressing minorities. We think that even lower decile schools should be learning about budget economics and things like this because it actually gives them the skills to go on into the modern world. When you have an economics topic that's incredibly big, you don't get this engagement with complex issues, and therefore we think that the national curriculum setting these complex issues is things that the educational system can cater to, you're going to get more educated citizens overall. We also told you that you're going to be more informed and able to make decisions about your own life, which is going to better these people and improve the cycles of poverty that are iterated throughout our society, and we improve the quality of life for these people as well. Okay, moving on to my contribution, why this actually benefits the indigenous culture being represented in the national curriculum. Firstly, let's look at the status quo and look at why schools don't actually teach this content curriculum, and we don't get text on perspectives on voting society because these teachers have never experienced it themselves, and we don't actually know if these teachers actually have an understanding about it. Secondly, there's also just the underlying racism and structural racism that prevents these teachers, either the teachers themselves or like inherent racist, or teachers are like looking at the parents and they're not sure if this is going to be like going to fly with the parents because parents might like put up a fight. When the national curriculum states that these are texts that should be taught in school, this completely gets rid of the issues of teachers like wondering if this is the right choice or if it's going to be a little too controversial to teach, because the national curriculum is basically asking people to teach it. Okay, so why does this actually improve the knowledge about these texts and get better visibility to these poets and authors? Firstly, you get more pooling of resources, which means that when these teachers are going to have to teach these texts, you're going to see more texts like Wiki and Himayan and Tanamu, which details the slices with Maori societies, it details the mass migration of these Maori communities, and you see students learning about the content and actually like understanding the more structural issues as to why there's poverty in our society, as to why these people deserve our empathy and understanding. This completely gets rid of the bigotry around these Maori issues, and when you see these stories from their perspective, you're going to get a better understanding of these people. However, we also tell you that there's a direct improvement of the quality of life for these Maori elders and poets themselves because there's better visibility and there's better understanding of where their writing is actually coming from. Rather than teaching like Shakespeare in school, we're going to have more of these texts and more of this understanding in the school, and resources are actually going to curate them. When you have a study of Maori texts, we're going to have more people actually focusing on these texts and understanding them. We're at the end of this point, we believe it's imperative of the national curriculum to actually include these perspectives in our educational system, and we get better educated citizens proud to stand on their own.
Wonderful. I thank the speaker for her speech, and I invite the second speaker of the negating team to continue her team's case.
When a student who basically struggles with basic reading and writing, because when they stare at a page, the words are literally moving, and they really struggle to even read the words, when they're now having to be set the same word as a student who wants to achieve really well, who wants to read the harder text, because those are the ones that they can pick greater things for greater analysis, they can do really well with these scholarship texts, right? When the app is forcing these two students to read the exact same content, either one of them are going to miss out and be terribly disadvantaged, or probably in a more realistic sense, both of them are. And it actually needs to pick a side here to choose which student you're actually wanting to benefit, because at this point in time, they're going to greatly help both students here. Four sort of things to cover in my speech today. Firstly, who really caters for these individual students? Secondly, do we get this diversity of curriculum onto our side of the house, like for important issues? Thirdly, on cohesiveness, and then fourthly, a bit of an extension about how we get better teaching under our side of the house, and then I'll talk about what the most important thing is. So jumping straight in now, who really caters for these individual students? So what actually is this comparison here? We've heard from Africa we're going to have these civil servants, right, who are like going to work with like professionals to set this curriculum. Under our side of the house, we still have these teachers, right? Why do they always have better incentives? Firstly, because they actually get to see in the classroom environment this really raw, very like unique engagement of like how students respond to certain pieces of work, right? They see like what these students struggle with, they see what they've struggled with in past years, they see what they like students find really find they can get incredibly passionate about, right? They're always able to get this better level of engagement that doesn't get on their side of the house. Secondly though, we're still able to have students picking their own internals under our side of the house, right? So we need to make it really clear that A isn't just standing by teaching racism in the history class, they're standing by teaching the exact same genocide for every single student in the country, right? That's really important to note, because under our side of the house, we have students who are like taking a certain standard, but they're able to choose which genocide they find really interesting, which level of which topic they find they can really lean engage with because they're really passionate about it. Under their side of the house, they're never going to be able to better cater for students when they're setting one standard for every single student in the country, because this is a flaw in their case, right? Because not every single student learns the same, because not every single student has the same platform, the same sort of like family community even, to even like be able to achieve things in school. Because not every single student has the same passions, the same interests, and they don't all get excited and like engage about the same thing. This is the flaw in their case, because they are forcing every single student from the top of the country to the bottom to learn the exact same thing, regardless of their level. They're never able to educate the students. Secondly now, do we get diversity of curriculum for important matters under our side of the house? Because this is the main benefit from side back. Right. They have people doing like important history topics because like that's what it's doing. A few responses here. First thing to tell you, there's probably not actually going to be the great benefits that they tried to tell you that they got into their side of the house. Because like in a classroom environment, they're probably more realistically forcing high school boys who still call their like female peers dishwashers to learn about like the suffragette movement. We think there's never going to be that same level of engagement. We think actually there's a far greater harm at the point in time where these male students are going to become incredibly resentful of the movement. They're going to sort of like only have more ammunition with which to like attack their female peers on. We think they're probably likely to disengage far more because it's just something they don't see in their everyday life because they don't maybe the members of their community just aren't necessarily the same people that they're learning about, right? We also don't think that they're actually able to have some political capital into their side of the house anyway to necessarily force out the exact same curriculum of Indigenous rights, right? Because we think that New Zealand is probably actually an incredibly racist country and not every single person and there's going to be an incredible amount of backlash when you have to force every single student to learn about Indigenous rights using their own logic here about how parents are probably going to like have a lot of engagement with the school community here. We tell them there's going to be a lot of backlash. Secondly, though, under this point, under the status quo, we actually have these important topics to talk anyway, right? A few reasons for this. First thing is it's literally just the NZIER curriculum under the status quo, right? Because almost every single history internal or like standard, has to relate back to New Zealand, right? There's always going to be that level of importance, just like written in the curriculum. Secondly, because teachers, we think, probably care that teachers teach these things because they care about their students anyway, because like the history topics went into the field because they're really, really passionate about things that have impacted people in the past, right? But we think that they care about their students and they're always going to be teaching things that's like necessarily engage their students, right? And they're actually incredibly passionate about this. More on this later. And thirdly though, let's talk about using their own logic here, right? We tell you that like if parents can influence the system so much, right? I think that like if we were to leave out like something so important as Indigenous rights on our side of the house is going to be or something that's not really core to New Zealand is going to be an incredible amount of backlash. Thirdly though, we're actually able to still get this catered content under our side of the house. We're like now making these things important to like specific regions, right? Because we're still able to teach things like multi-land laws. We're now able to teach students in like Dunedin the important stuff about Otago, all the stuff about the like engagement there. And now this means that there's going to be a far higher level of engagement because the students are now looking out the window and seeing the same hills that we've fought over. And this is really, really important because we're still able to do this, but it just means that like a student in Auckland isn't going to be disengaged because they don't see the things that are happening in Dunedin. Finally,
why on your side of the house should bigoted individuals be allowed to pursue an education that supports their community?
right, we think this is no, clearly we're having students this is like a curriculum set by a teacher who thinks always going to like care about teaching like a diverse range of things anyway, and if not, there's always going to be like systems in place that will literally stop them from teaching bigoted content. You made this really clear from Caleb. Finally, a bit of clashing cohesiveness, right? We actually think this is incredibly unimportant because it actually proves our point furthermore. We think it's an incredibly flawed system when every single student all across the country is learning the same, is learning cohesively, right? Because we tell you it's never going to be cohesiveness at the point in time where students aren't actually making it to uni because they either weren't because under their side of the house they either weren't passionate enough to like stay in school because the topics now become incredibly boring. But moreover, because the students just weren't able to achieve because these students with learning disabilities are no longer getting the achieve grades because they're having to be learning content that is like for far more advanced skills. Right. How do we get teaching under our side of the house? A really small extension here. The comparison here is that teachers under their side of the house, under our side of the house, are choosing broad topics for standards that these students can do. There's like a history teacher who's really, really qualified or an expert at feminism because they did their thesis on it, is now able to set understand that like these students, right? Or like a biology teacher who's experienced genetic variation and change, right? It takes us away, right? Because they're having these same standards, the same texts, set by the same head office, who don't engage with these modern day students. Four harms here, firstly, because teachers can't actually hone in on these extra skills. Because these skills that they learned when they went to university is now wasted because they're teaching the same mind-numbing content. Because teachers are now less passionate about their topics because they just simply don't have that same level of engagement because it was set by somebody else far above them. Because teachers are now going to be incredibly bored because they're now teaching the same content for years and years on end. Why is this important? Because teachers are so valuable at the point in time where they can literally shape a student's career and their whole life, because that is the difference between whether they pass something or not. That is so crucial. Another path to victory for you guys. Incredibly proud to stand.
Wonderful. I thank the speaker for her speech, and I invite the third affirmative speaker to conclude his team's case.
In response to ESO's POI, Simonese wanted to tell us that teachers could teach a diverse range of things in the curriculum and inform and educate their students on this. If this is something that you buy, and this is something that you agree with, then Side F is the perfect side for you, because this is what our entire system is built on, right? We get this diverse education around these important issues, regardless of whether teachers choose to do it or not, regardless of whether they believe in it, because it's built into our curriculum. We claim something that they admitted was a benefit. 3 points of question today's debate. Firstly, how we're going to win today's debate. Let me be very clear. This debate was never about getting students the best marks. This debate was about how we are going to create a more aware society and actually create a better society and an education system that helps students fit into the society, which we believe is the primary goal and function of the education system. This is what it serves to do. 3 points of clash to prove this to you today. Firstly, how we create a more understanding and aware society, the crucial point of clash in today's debate. Secondly, why we get better engagement. And thirdly, how we help disadvantaged students. So firstly, on to this point about how we create a more understanding and aware society. So we brought this point out really strongly at first, and throughout the debate, we heard them try to prioritize other points. They didn't engage with it properly. This is the most crucial point in the debate. So we told you that through teaching texts and histories about different cultures and sexualities and perspectives, we create a less ignorant and more aware society. What did they tell us? Their first level of response was teachers are still racist and sexist, so there's no change. First response here is that it's much easier to call out racism and sexism in the classroom now when this is built into the curriculum, so it's far easier to point that out, realise when they're being like that, and be able to easily push back against it. Secondly, we think that when it's specifically built into the curriculum that they have to teach the land wars were really bad for Māori, and this is a really bad thing, it's much harder to push these kind of views and push away from this, because what they're doing then is they're just going against the curriculum, which is going to get them fired, right? They literally can't do that. We think our system actually provides to stop this, and we therefore create a system that pushes against us. They also then wanted to bring us this point about boys who see women as dishwashers, and so don't change their perspective. This was a really crucial point in today's debate, because their side is a side of the house that doesn't even attempt to change these boys' perspectives. They therefore let them essentially feel that these perspectives are okay. These are perspectives that are allowed in society. Our side, when we learn about the resilience tenacity and leadership of Kate Shepherd, it challenges these views, it pushes these people to understand that, hey, actually all women aren't dishwashers. And even if we don't get every boy to change their opinion, we think that a lot of these people change their perspective because they are willing to agree with like a reasonable argument when it's built into the curriculum. We actually provide a chance to change these opinions and perspectives. He so then brought you this great split about how we make the education system like better for like Māori people, where we add like more about their culture, more about their history, a topic that usually gets like swept under the rug in our current society. We didn't really care about response to this. What this means and what is really important in today's debate is for a couple of reasons. Firstly, it means that those Māori people are likely to be more engaged with the system, which directly clashes with their engagement point. But secondly, it means that they actually get like coverage like in this education system, which is really, really important for us to like celebrate them as like a massive part of our history, of our culture, of what makes New Zealand like unique and what makes us as a country. We clearly create a better society that's more aware. The outcome of this point is that in society we get much less of these like racist, sexist, bigoted views, and we create a society that is more cohesive and can function together. They never really wanted to engage us in this point, but it's so crucial because it has the widest impact on the debate because it impacts how society functions. This is clearly crucial, and it also impacts this engagement point. So now moving on to why we get better engagement. So they told us that teachers are best able to choose what engages students. 4 responses to this for you today. Firstly, a lot of teachers are out of touch with the modern world, right? We see a lot of particularly older teachers that are still in the education system who don't really know what the hell students are like wanting to be taught these days. They do not understand the modern world and they therefore best can't relate to the teachers. We think we can get like the whole education industry doing research, they're probably going to understand what students want and the modern world a little bit more. Secondly, we think that they make decisions based on like their personal opinions, right? What aligns with their values, but also what is easier to teach. They're going to pick these things based on what they want to teach, which we think is really crucial because it means you don't get this proper range that's best beneficial to students. Thirdly, they tried to say that teachers were held accountable if they for poor performance, and therefore they were incentivized to teach things that were engagement. But teachers have like huge job security, right? Like we have a massive teacher shortage. They're not really held accountable. Also, it's really easy to make excuses like, oh, that student just wasn't really engaged. It was the student's fault. I had like a lower, level of class, and it's really easy to like get those excuses out, and therefore it doesn't fall on the teachers. Fourthly, look at the comparative on side F. We set a holistic curriculum, and we actually like consult these schools and consult like different like education avenues to actually get the best result. We therefore get the best understanding of the modern world and the best understanding of what is engaging students. They also said that in our world, when they taught things that they don't relate to, they disengage. 2 responses. Firstly, just like blatantly not true, right? As engaging with something like outside their perspective, it's like what like a lot of students enjoy to do. They like to learn about different things because they probably already know about the current things that are impacting them in their current society, and learning about new things is something that's probably really interesting to them and a fresh change. But secondly, we think it's really important that they do learn the stuff outside their perspective because we change like these bigoted views from like a single-minded perspective and create like a more holistic perspective, which goes back to that society point and shows why this is really crucial. They also said that there's less engagement as teachers get bored. Firstly, we review the curriculum and it may change over time depending on factors like this. And secondly, teachers will still engage as it's still a key subject field. We think that like teachers do not have full control over like everything they teach now. They're still going to be engaged because they have a passion for helping students, not necessarily everything that they are teaching specifically. I'll take one information out here.
What benefit does a diverse or progressive curriculum have on a student who doesn't even pass?
Well, we think that like what we wanted to say here was they're not going to set texts that are like way above the level of their students. They're going to set texts that are probably like prepare you the best for university, and therefore from that you can like lower the level of the text. But I'll get onto this in the third point of class on how we help disadvantaged students. So they tried to say that they cater better for disadvantaged students as they're like taught easier texts, so they actually can pass. 2 responses. Firstly, we aren't going to teach insanely hard texts, right? Because we're setting this for the whole curriculum, we're probably going to teach texts that are like around that middle level that best prepare you for university, right? Which they need, right? And we think this is really important. But also, secondly, we think that it's really easy to like lower the like level within the text or like increase the level within the text, right? Because you can teach like specific themes within a text that are like much more complex or specific themes which are much more like easier to understand. We think there's clear levels there that are easy to differentiate. Now, we still think students are going to pass.
we don't think this is going to be incredibly hard. We also told you about pooling resources and ways to help between schools, which never got responded to. So crucial is the unique benefit that they get access to the stuff when there's a shortage of supplies, which impacts the ability of these lower deciles to teach. At the end of today's debate, we decide that builds New Zealand, that builds a society, will actually improving a curriculum, a status quo that has failed us for years. Proud to vote.
I thank the speaker for his speech, and I invite the third negating speaker to finish the constructive portion of today's debate.
Let us be clear on one very key issue. The AFT case is not getting rid of racist teachers from New Zealand society. The AFT case is forcing these racist teachers to teach topics, and then they are going to teach it in a very bigoted way. That is what they do. They are letting these teachers pass on their horrible, horrible views to impressionable young people. They can never improve society when they allow that to happen. 3 questions for the House. Firstly, what is more important? Is it achievement of students or having a diverse education system? Secondly, which side better caters to students and gets better educational results? And then thirdly, which side gets greater diverse education? Okay, on what's more important. It necessarily has to be achievement, because when you have students that aren't even passing the curriculum because they disengage, because they do not care about the topics, because they are being forced to learn something that is well above their difficulty level, they are never going to pass, and they are never going to get those so important qualifications. We think that it's so important for society, as they have tried to tell us that society is the most important thing in this debate. We think it's so important for society if you actually have people that leave high school having qualifications, having education of the world around them. They never get that, because instead of teaching somebody that has a genuine interest in something that happens in their local community, they have like an actual interest in learning about Ngāi Tahu because they're from the South Island. We think those people are so much more likely to do well, to engage with what the teacher's saying because it's relevant to them, than if they're just being forced to learn about something that's happening on the other side of the country where they do not care. It does not impact their life. They don't want to focus. They would much rather learn something else. We're the side that allows these teachers to say, oh, I live in New Plymouth. I should probably be teaching my students about the Waikato dispute as opposed to the invasion of the Waikato. We think that's so important. You still get this incredibly important diverse education, but you get it focused on this region where people can actually engage. So important. As well, we think it's just really important for people to have like an actual qualification. When people have disengaged so much that they no longer are able to pass, when their teachers have disengaged because it's not a topic that interests them, so they can't teach well, and these people no longer get a qualification, that just means that they literally can't get a high quality job. They can't get into university. They don't get a scholarship. That is so harmful to all of these people, and that is what they stand for. I will now continue.
Okay, would you rather boys who may be sexist learn about these issues and gain this perspective, or just not teach them?
We think that firstly, they are going to learn about it a lot of the time. The teachers care about it. But secondly, it's probably not a good thing to let these people just be taught by like bigoted teachers that want to pass on like horrible sexist views. We're the side that stops that from happening. So important. Secondly, then, which side better caters to students and gets achievement? What have we heard from ACT? They've had 3 claims here. Firstly, they've told us that low decile schools don't have the resources. We're actually telling them that there's so much worse on their side when they're now forcing those low decile schools to teach a new topic that they probably don't have resources for. It's really important that like these low decile schools probably do have resources for the topics that they teach, because they're literally teaching that. When ACT is now forcing them to make a completely new curriculum where they're having to teach these certain topics that they don't know about, etc., what that means is that they don't have these resources, they're no longer able to get them, and that means that they make that problem much worse. Secondly, even if there's still so many online free resources like Khan Academy, etc., that these schools have. Next, they told us that they're all.
Just
Next, they told us that
No.
they're going to be able to
hold on, Robert. I'll stop your time. Paul's just going to turn the light back on. The power is not out because I still have Wi-Fi.
No, I'll come over with a
No, you stay there. Hey, we're all okay? No one's dead? Yeah, it was perfect. Do you want my phone? Okay.
You take a moment.
Yeah. Begin whenever you're ready.
Next, we heard from ACT that they're going to get better engagement from minority students, and that's going to lead to better results for them. What happens, though, is that they're never able to teach 50 different topics to all of the different diverse communities in New Zealand. We think that it's incredibly important for a school that has a majority Pacifica community to learn about issues that affect the Pacifica community, that have impacted their family, impacted their culture. That's so much more important to those people to learn that as opposed to learning something that is more relevant to other groups in New Zealand. We're the side that allows a school that has that community to say, oh, this is going to be really, really relevant to these people. We think that at schools with a high population of Māori, as they try to claim as like their main benefit, we still get their same benefit. They're still going to teach these Māori issues. But when we get a school that has lots of Asian New Zealanders, we're able to teach that community. When we're at a rural school, we're able to teach issues that benefit that specific rural community. They're not able to have these 50 different topics in the curriculum that can benefit all of them. We're the side that gets the most relevant ones for certain groups. That's so important. Then their final claim on how they get better education is just that they're able to teach important topics like rogenomics and like evolution. We think that falls out of the debate at the point where most schools, apart from the humanities, probably teach the same things. This debate was always about like humanities topics. What should the history curriculum be? What novels should be taught? What have we told you then? And why is that so much more important? Well, firstly, we think that the thing that they never even engage with is the fact that bottom students and top students should not be learning the same material. If you are dyslexic and literally cannot read a 5,000-page War and Peace book, then you are never going to be able to pass that external on that book. That is because it's going to fly above your head. You're not going to understand things. So it's much more important for these students to be given a book that is at a lower difficulty level, like The Hunger Games, where the theme is really clear from reading it, where you don't have to do so much in-depth analysis into what it's trying to say, when you can actually understand the themes and you can actually get educational value from the book. That is how you get education. You don't get education by giving them an advanced book that caters towards like the middle person in society. You get education by having a book that caters towards the class. This means that an English A class can teach a complex book, an English B class can teach the type of book they would set for everyone, and an English C class can teach a lower level book so that everybody gets advantage. As well, they never properly engaged with our passion points. They never disputed the fact that you're much more likely to do well if you're passionate about your topic. So at the end of this class, we've shown that we're the side that gets greater educational achievement. Therefore, we've won this debate as I've already established why it's the most important thing. Lastly, then, on a diverse education. 3 claims here. Firstly, about racist teachers. I already addressed this in my introduction, but it's much worse to have racist teachers teaching a topic to impressionable students. They tried to refute this by saying, oh, they'll get fired. We think unions have so much power that they're never going to let these teachers be fired. Secondly, they tried to dispute it by saying the curriculum is going to say you have to teach it in a certain way that's positive. We don't think that's what the curriculum does. The curriculum says you teach the NZ words. It doesn't say you teach the NZ words and this impact, which means that it was so bad for this group. That falls out of the debate. Secondly, then, they tried to tell us that it's going to be like a perfect diverse curriculum. This never engaged with all of the points that we heard at Sophie about the fact that like when Judith Campbell stands up for her 2023 campaign, she's going to be like, let's get rid of this woke education system. What that means is they never get these actual benefits. You just get something that the middle ground New Zealander, white person For this reason, they don't integrate for diverse education. We get better education for students. That's so important. We've won this debate.
I thank the speaker for his speech, and as is traditional, we reverse the team order and invite the negating reply leader to give her speech.
Three questions to ask yourself at the end of today's debate. Firstly, who better caters for students? And secondly, what's the most important thing in this debate? Is it the achievement of students or is it the diversity of the curriculum? Right, who better caters for students? The comparison here was like on our side of the house, on their side of the house, they were going to have people in a head office in Wellington, see a curriculum for the whole country. Under our side of the house, we had teachers who see the incredibly raw experiences of these students, who see the incredibly raw struggles of these students, who actually know the students on a personal level, be able to set the curriculum. So why is this always going to be better under our side of the house? Because we tell you that teachers know their students. It means that they're actually able to set these texts or like topics at a level that can actually fit their students, right? It's because a teacher is the only one who knows if the students in a certain class are actually going to pass a standard, right? They're the only ones who know if the students in their class are going to do well, and they can therefore set it at that level. It allows students to even like just pass because that's really, really important for them. Also, flourishing cases when they flourish, because outside the house, they are only able to ever benefit one kind of student, and they leave out so many other incredibly vulnerable and incredibly important people who actually deserve to do really, really well and who will do well under our side of the house. Secondly, because these teachers actually know what these students are passionate about, because they know, and under our side of the house, we have students who actually want to come to school because they are like really passionate and about what they're learning, because they really want to learn. Why? Because every single class is different, and this was where AFS lost the debate because they were unable to actually engage with this material. Because what actually engages the boys at Auckland Grammar is always necessarily going to be different than what engages the students at Westport School on the West Coast, right? We're telling you that every single student deserves to learn, and this is what Side F takes away because they disengage these students by setting one curriculum that will only benefit one kind of student all across the country. We also told you that teachers are always going to be teaching better under our side of the house if we didn't teach engagement with. Right. What's the most important thing in this debate? Is it achievement or is it diversity of curriculum? We told you there's like a lot of material about why we're probably still able to get this diversity of curriculum under our side of the house, because we think the NZIER curriculum is diverse and because we think teachers just necessarily like really care about things that impact people, because they're always going to like care about their students and impacting the students. We gave you these really, really clear instances and mechanisms all down our line. But we actually tell you the most important thing in this debate was always going to be achievement of students. Why? Because there are two kinds of broad students we're looking at here. And we're talking about students who actually will not pass their year, right? We're talking about students who probably have learning difficulties, or who perhaps just don't have the right home support, or just weren't raised in the right environment. And Side A has just never really engaged with the fact that some students just generally struggle, but it's actually okay that they struggle because we're able to cater for them on the outside of the house. It is so important that they get this education and because they deserve this education. Diversity of a curriculum is never going to be important to these students because if they can't get these grades that are going to allow them to like pass the year, to like finish high school with some sort of degree or accolades, and they're never going to get this job. We care about these students because they deserve to learn, even if they underperform or they struggle in school, because that is actually okay. They also block out though the higher achieving students unless they're able to pick one kind of student. I think it's really, really important for students who like do really well in school to be able to flourish and learn about things that are really, really important to them on this side of the house. They necessarily block these out unless they're choosing to only impact these students and therefore setting war and peace for every single student in every single classroom, which is never going to be okay because because it is that point in time you're losing students, you're having students fail a year, or they just can never be interested. We care about these students. We're the only side that's able to impact every single student, and they lost the debate because they did not impact that every single student is different.
I thank the speaker for her speech, and I invite the leader of the affirmative team to give the final speech of the debate.
key issue in today's debate was never about marks, was never about whether people were going to get UE or not. Because things like UE, we can tailor and upskill teachers to be able to achieve. We can tailor the curriculum to be engaging for certain people. We've told you this down the line. The key thing in today's debate was about whether or not we create New Zealand citizens that are going to best suit New Zealand society for the next 50, for the next 100 years. We wanted to take our head out of the capitalist world in which education is only a means for creating productive and well-educated citizens on their side of the house. We wanted to look bigger picture. That's what we have done in today's debate. 3 questions for the House. Firstly, whether set content creates better citizens. Secondly, whether we get more engagement. And thirdly, on the specific ramifications for those students in low decile schools. Firstly, on whether set content creates better citizens. The first thing I want to point out here is that they never contested the reasons why there were deficiencies in the curriculum that I outlined at first. I outlined 5 reasons why certain teachers or schools are going to miss certain parts that are important in the curriculum. They didn't respond to that. Their claim really in response was that, in some cases, you have bigoted teachers, so even if you create more diversity in the curriculum, that doesn't happen. A couple of responses. Firstly, we told you it's really easy to call out racism in the classroom. It's a lot harder to do that when just a school is sort of sidelining a certain part of the curriculum that's a lot more hidden. But secondly, we've told you students won't succeed if there's a very biased teaching of this curriculum that's not actually in line with what the curriculum and the exams will be. That means that just takes the ammunition out of these teachers being able to do that. Their next claim, which they sort of tried to case shift later in the debate, was that, we get the diverse range on the their side of the house too. A couple of responses. We told you why we do this far better is we actually manufacture that into our curriculum. We don't rely on specific teachers to do it. But secondly, they didn't think about implications of certain parts of their case and how this affects their point. Because if they want to talk about all of their stuff, about how learning about local culture and issues is most important, then what they want is for all white schools in New Zealand to solely learn about white history, to solely learn about Shakespeare, to not learn about Maori poets. That's what they want. They didn't think about how that clashes in their case. Why is this the most important part of this debate? Firstly, because of the magnitude of impact that this will not only have on racism and sexism in New Zealand, but for years to come. And secondly, because even if we get slightly less engaged students with this curriculum, they still absorb some of these ideas by being in the classroom, by being exposed to these ideas. Huge win on that. Secondly, on engagement. We told you that it's about the quality of teaching and how this specifically affects engagement. It's not all about the curriculum. Their key claim under this was teachers are good at choosing what engages the students. But we said, no, teachers choose based on what their own interests, what they know about, what their thesis is about. That was literally their whole split, and what they think is easy. Then they tried to tell you that they learned about local issues that specifically affects their culture. That's really good. A couple of responses. Firstly, we tell you they may not even teach this because of what we told, the implications of why teachers choose specific content. Secondly, because on our side of the house, we still have this in curriculum. But as well as this being a specific local issue being in the curriculum, you also get, that might be a small part of it, but you get a whole broad range of a lot of different stuff. That's what they don't get under their side of the house. We also told you that people like learning about issues outside of their region and culture. Engagement, we get better under our side of the house, but even if we don't get it, far more important to focus on cultural understanding. Finally, on lower decile schools, it's important to point out they never responded to our stuff about how we get pooling of resources and teacher mobility that helps uplift lower decile schools. All they wanted to say is this curriculum is inaccessible. We've told you down the line that when you take a test, you can have different approaches to this, different levels of content to be taught within one text where they still get the same ideas. Proud to support Big Picture New Zealand, proud to propose.
Wonderful. I thank the speakers for an excellent debate, and I invite them to cross the floor and shake hands and then leave the room.